What's the grossest thing you've seen someone do in public? Story 1. Walk out of a supermarket, squat in between the automatic doors, lift dress, take a huge dump right there, not even bother wiping with anything, stand up and walk away while the automatic doors squash the I honestly felt like I had landed in Bizarro World, so did the dozen or so other people watching this happen in broad daylight. The fact that her 6 to 7 years old stood next to her and was completely unfazed by any of it, made me think it was neither the first nor the most extreme thing she'd ever done. Story 2. Once, while I was having dinner at a chicken place with my family many years ago, this couple in the corner literally started picking each other's face acne and wiping it with napkins. A manager came over and kicked them out. Story 3. I was at the gym, 24-hour fitness, big sweaty guy comes in the sauna, sits down with a bottle of water, normal right? No, drinks a mouthful and proceeds to spit it into the water evaporator, whole thing on the wall, so me and the other 5 people leave fast because in a few secs the sauna would have been filled with his evaporated spit water. Story 4. NYCM train, man shot up heroin. Then the girl he was with proceeded to take her skirt off and he proceeded to raw dog. Anyways, me and the handful of others who were at this point at the other end of the train car quickly got out of the next stop to run to another car. Story 5. This happened while I was living in Vancouver. I was taking the bus home after work and a man sitting directly across from me kept rubbing his crotch. I didn't think much of it and went back to reading my book. I noticed him getting a little more animated and looked up to see him unzip his fly and pull out his uncircumcised penis. I looked from side to see if anyone else was seeing this. I was the only one who noticed, or everyone else was just desensitized to this type of. I looked back to see him pinching his foreskin between his fingers over and over. Then he slowly lifted the hand he was using to pinch with, and to my utter amazement his penis began to lift in time with his hand. Not getting erect, mind you, but a flaccid penis rising up like he was a goddamn snake charmer. I had no idea what was going on. I was utterly astounded and couldn't look away. Then his hand reached about chest height and his penis flopped back down to sadly rest outside of his zipper. I looked up again to see him extending that same hand out into the aisle of the bus, and it was then I realized what had happened. He was holding a piece of hair that had to have been 18 inches long. He had pulled all of that hair out of his foreskin. That explained the snake-charmed penis rising as he pulled the hair. He then rubbed his fingers together, and we both watched the hair as it fell to the floor of the bus. I looked up from where the hair fell in time to watch him put his away, smell his fingers, pick his nose, then pull the cord for his stop in that order. I never saw him again, but any time I notice one of my wife's stray hairs around the house I pause for just a second and think of the Vancouver snake charmer. Edit, thanks for the award. Story 6. Once when I was homeless, I had the shits. I was too far away in either direction from a store bathroom and had no choice but to duck inside a dumpster enclosure and blast the wall, and had nothing to wipe myself with but my sock. The thing is, I saw someone else a day or two later wearing the sock. It was a very unique looking, both in color and pattern, sock. I only used and left the one sock. He was only wearing one of that sock, and I never saw another sock like it before or since. Story 7. I work in care, and there was this one lad who loved to smear all over himself. Anyway, I managed to avoid him doing this for a good amount of time when I was on shift. One day he went to bed and seemed a little giddy, which wasn't completely unusual anyway. I was trying to sleep and all I could hear was this guy chuckling to himself in the next room, so I thought I better check it out. Lo and behold, this guy must have been saving it up for days. He was caked from head to toe in like an inch thick of, all over his face right the way down to his feet, laughing his head off like he had accomplished something wonderful. I don't think I'll ever forget that. Story 8. I watched a guy walk up to another guy at a bar, look him in his face, pick up the Budweiser bottle on the table, and take a drink of what he thought was the other guy's beer. He was trying to be intimidating but instead got a big gulp of the other guy's tobacco spit bottle. He threw up on the spot. Story 9. Watched a dude himself and pass out at our public park when I was in high school, clearly down on his luck. The cops came and brought toilet paper and latex gloves. There was everywhere, his face, body, legs, everywhere. They made him clean himself up and took him away. Story 10. I once saw a guy, who didn't appear to be homeless, walk along the sidewalk eating a slice of pizza. He stopped at a public trash can to continue eating, and I didn't think anything of it until I saw him reach into said trash can, pull out a half-drank Diet Coke and started drinking it himself. Story 11. I was at a Buc-ee's and watched a kid, about 9, with his hand down the back of his shorts, aggressively digging in his. He then sniffed his finger, reeled back, and wiped it off on the condiment station counter, leaving brown streaks. He then started grabbing tongs and condiment bottles to dress up his food. By the time I could warn an employee, he had contaminated an entire bank of drink machines using his finger to press 9 buttons, making a mix of sodas, and handling 2 wrong-sized lids before finding the one that fit. Kids are so gross. Story 12. I used to work in an old bank building that looked closed from the outside, but the call center employees still worked there. One day I'm sitting at my desk near the window and some lady parked her car and came and took a dump right in front of my window. In her defense, it had a nice bush to hide from the road, but she had no idea people were right behind the window. Story 13. My ex-wife never washed her hands after she took always a thing that bothered me. I asked every time and got the same answer. She said she didn't touch the, glad we're divorced now, and I teach my kids to wash their hands after they. Story 14. At a hookah lounge, girl smoking started puking on the couch and 2 minutes later the waitress came over, turned the pillow on the couch around, and everyone continued with their evening. Story 15. Maybe not the grossest, But this happened recently and came to mind. Entered the bathroom and began using the urinal. When I entered, one of the cubicle doors was closed. Midstream I hear a guy pronounce loudly and in a Scottish accent release the Kraken, followed by straining and the loudest I've ever heard. I washed my hands and left quickly. My colleagues and I are trying to work out who it was. Story 16 I'll repost. This is an actual real thing that happened, 1997 or thereabouts at my university. Outside the library, there was a huge 100m x 100m lawn, think the Olympic race. It was big, and right in the middle, on a sunny afternoon in the middle of the week, two people just, not a care in the world, just happily going at it. On one side of the lawn there was a cafe which was surrounded by a weird water feature moat. It was a challenge to jump across the moat and into the cafe, and people would fall in fairly regularly. The water was green, full of algae, and pretty smelly if it got on you. There's about 50 people sitting in the cafe, drinking tea and coffee, and watching some enthusiastic missionary. Eventually, someone's had enough for whatever reason. They fill up something with the green pond water and start marching towards the couple. Everyone just watches. Pretty much all you can hear is the water spilling out of the bucket and slap, slap, slap as they just keep. Bucket guy is now about 5 feet away. They haven't noticed at all. He takes a big swing and underarms the green water basically straight at their genitals. Chaos ensues. The audience cheer and clap, etc. That water though, that was not safe for anything, let alone getting up there at pace. Hope they got some antibiotics or something. Story 17 Once I saw a dude himself on the treadmill at the gym, all out his shorts and down his legs, onto the treadmill and subsequently onto the floor and wall behind him. It was disgusting. Story 18 I used to run a store that was on the street leading to the local psychiatric hospital, and every Thursday was outpatient day. Patients would get off the bus on Main Street, then walk the 4 blocks to the hospital, right past my store, so I would regularly see and hear some pretty weird. Probably the weirdest, grossest was when a customer entering the store told me there was a naked woman in my parking lot. One of the patients was apparently having an episode. It was pouring rain and she's naked in a huge mud puddle, just rolling around, washing herself with mud, and not in a nice way. Took about an hour, EMTs and the police to sort her out. Fun times, so glad I left retail. Story 19 A public park during a flower exposition that happens every year. There was a circle with a tree in the middle, and people were walking on the path around it enjoying the flowers with their phones out for pics. Then you'd look under that tree and find a man and a woman lying on the grass, making out and hip thrusting. His pants were low and she had a skirt. Genuinely, kind of ruined the mood of the day. I was with a family and a few friends and it was so awkward. There was lots of families with kids too, literally a playground nearby. I saw people record them and everything. Thought they kind of asked for it by doing it in public. I don't feel an ounce of sympathy. LMAO, if you're freaky enough to willingly do it publicly, then you should know other freaky people are going to record it. About 10 or so years ago I went into a fast food restaurant and saw a woman on drugs dipping dollar bills and napkins into a massive mound of ketchup on a tray and then licking and eating them. The sight and overwhelming smell of it was enough for me that I still get nauseous thinking about it. Since then, I have not touched ketchup and the sight and smell of it completely grosses me out. Story 20 On the last train leaving London after New Year's Eve, woman in a tiny dress on all fours puking in the aisle. That was pretty bad already on a packed train, but she also herself while puking, there was no hiding it. That dress barely covered her cheeks, very unpleasant. Story 21 It wasn't voluntary but it sure was public. Shared this on an alt before but worth sharing again. When I visited Ukraine before the war, my fiancée and I went to a dog park early one morning to walk her dog. We saw a man there, half naked, tied to a tree. He seemed to have a bit of dog waste on his face and chest, and a sign in Ukrainian above his head. I asked my fiancée, who said, "Oh yep, that's an animal abuser. He's going to spend the whole day there and he's not going to like it." Both dog waste bins inside the dog park itself were chained shut. It was pretty clear what the implication was. Her dog didn't go, but as we were walking away, we saw an elderly woman with 2 German shepherds, walking up to the offender with baggies in hand. He cried and begged, but she just calmly inverted each baggie and smeared it all over his face and hair. He was covered. Guess those were the first big dogs of the day. Story 22 A homeless man presses up against a wall and proceed to shitsplode all over the wall. You know how when you put your thumb over the end of a hose nozzle and it goes everywhere? That, but on broad daylight, with hundreds of people walk past as it's a city center. Story 23 In my science class a girl had her period. Proceeded to check with her fingers and then cleaned them off with her mouth. I was a solid 2 foot away watching. Story 24 One subway car, NYC, January 1st. It was early and I stepped into the car and looked around and there was puke on almost every surface. I could tell what everyone had eaten before going out for the night. The smell of alcohol and vomit hit me in the face and turned me right around. I found a different car and processed the strange events that may have happened the night before. 2 rave, April Fools, at the Mount Airy Lodge in Pennsylvania. I'm guessing around 8K people were there, not enough bathrooms and poorly equipped for the amount of people. I had taken pills and acid and was flipping hard. I went to the bathroom and saw people in the same sinks people were filling water bottles up in. The urinals were occupied so I went into a stall. The toilet must have clogged but people kept shitting and piling rave flyers on top. There was a pile of 3 feet high and flowing over the sides onto the floor. I was having intense visuals anyway and couldn't believe what I was looking at. I tried another stall and same thing. decided to hold it. I was shook for a good hour and the visual stuck for longer than that. I still have flashbacks of that night. Story 25. Homeless dude straight pull his shorts to the side, then shat hot gravy diarrhea down his leg, reached down with a cupped hand, collecting a heaping handful of pudding, then proceeded to wipe an X on the glass at Macy's in San Francisco in broad daylight. I've never recovered. It's been 15 years probably. Story 26. Saw a guy put his bare foot on a leather seat at the shops and proceed to pick out stuff from between his toes, never sitting on a shopping center seat or bench again. Story 27. Was at a Ralph's grocery store waiting in the self-checkout lane. There was a young couple in front of us that were very touchy, especially the girl. At one point the girl full-on sticks her hand up the guy's, but like full-on trying to get up there and penetrate. The dude jumps a bit and pulls it out and she's there smiling and coming in closer to him. I get being cute and lovey, but the hand in but was not on my bingo card that day. Story 28. I was at a bus stop at night and these two guys drunk off their asses were talking to each other, and one of them keeps making really disgusting comments about how you should have a girlfriend who submits to all your desires and that other girls aren't worth it. And then he mentions somewhere in the conversation that his aunt molested him when he was 8. And the other guy is trying to steer him away from saying the worst of the stuff, I think, but he keeps doubling down. This was a few years ago and I don't remember the details of what they said, but I was a decade younger than them and very uncomfortable. Story 29. Beautiful Japanese woman on the train from Shibuya to Shinjuku casually opened up the sleeve of her white silk blouse and vomited liters of alcohol and bile into it, then closed it up and held it up so that she alone was responsible for her puke until she got off the train. Story 30. I watch, albeit briefly, a woman shaving her boobs on a beach, all the hair that her kazi wasn't keeping contained. Yeah, she wasn't exactly keeping hold of the trimming, so like a dust we just rolling along the beach in the wind. Story 31. Chatting with a guy at the local pool. After each sentence, takes a swig of water into his mouth, sloshes it around like mouthwash, spits it back into the pool. Story 32. Last week a couple beside me in the movie theater got on the floor to lay together and, I wish I was joking, clip their toenails fingernails, and shake it out their shorts leg and keep shopping, have the most violent diarrhea I've ever experienced from anyone, someone in the Coke bottle and leave it on the floor. This all occurred in a grocery store. Story 33. I saw two drunk guys stumble out of a bar in the morning. Guy 1 says he has to pee, Guy 2 says it's okay for Guy 1 to pee, and that he'll take care of it, then cups his hands together at waist level in front of Guy 1. Guy 1 unzips and pees directly into the cupped hands of Guy 2. After the pee ends, Guy 2 then just lets his hands go and drops the freshened pee on the sidewalk and rub his hands together like he just washed his hands. Then they walked away. I have no idea why they did this. Story 34. It might be minor compared to some here, but when I was a kid my dad took me to a local barbecue place and we watched the guy making our plate scratch his butt, like digging in his but while touching the Texas toast and stuff. Story 35. At a Flyers playoff game years ago at the old Spectrum, after the game sitting in the parking lot waiting for traffic to clear, a gentleman in a Tim Kerr jersey walks over to the guardrail on Broad Street with a section of newspaper in his hands. We are watching and wondering what is happening here. He turns his back to Broad Street, drops his pants and in one motion shits into the newspaper and flings it to Broad Street. A young lady was in the passenger seat of her mom's car and I look of absolute horror. The man then returned to his friends and one of the high-fived him with a fling hand. We named this move the Philly Flick. Story 36. This isn't the nastiest thing I've seen but one I vividly remember. Was using the bathroom at college and this girl goes in the stall next to me and throws her pad in the open trash can on the floor next to my stall. It fell in with a slap sound as it was heavy with blood. That was super gross. Most people wrap it up before tossing. She had not a care. Story 37. I've seen 3 people masturbating on the sidewalks in downtown Houston. I was at a red light at both. One was laying down on the sidewalk, no clothes on. People crossed the street to avoid the situation. The other, the guy was sitting on a bench by a park entrance. He was facing traffic trying to make eye contact with drivers. The third was a woman. She stripped down naked and started pleasuring herself across from City Hall. My light turned green each time and I went on my way. Story 38. I got this. Was sitting in a movie theater waiting for everything to dim and the previews to start. 1 row in front and 3 seats to the left of me. This guy starts cutting his toenails. Not only feet but the nails flying. It ruined my whole week. Apparently my yelling was hilarious for everyone though. Story 39. Saw a guy with his girlfriend in a Wetherspoons. I was a table away and it was quite noisy but he casually pulled out his thing and started urinating under the table while sitting down next to his girlfriend who was on her phone. The whole thing lasted 30 seconds and no one in the pub noticed anything. Story 40. When I was around 19 years old I was at a beach party with friends. We asked a guy we knew for a ride back to town after the party and piled into his sedan. There were 3 of us in the back seat. It was around 11 o'clock p.m. This was in Southern California, and we were cruising 101 with the windows down, carrying on like a bunch of drunk fools. But every 30 seconds or so the sprinklers on the side of the road would blast us as we drove by. We laughed as the water continually splashed us in the back seat. But it turns out that there were no sprinklers running. It was a guy in the front seat attempting to puke out the window at 50 miles per hour, and it all flew into the back seat several times. We stopped laughing. Story 41. I didn't actually see it happen, but there was a massive pile of fresh formless in the middle of the sidewalk at 8 in the morning. The part that got me was the white sock sitting on top. I still think about it 3 years later. Story 42. It was the aftermath, but someone left thong underwear in a decorative snack bowl meant for popcorn or chips on the sidewalk by the casino in the middle of downtown. You find a lot of discarded clothing in the downtown of my city. Story 43. I had at 8 a.m. class in college. At 7:30 a.m. I stood at an intersection waiting for the light to change. Suddenly I see someone walk into the grass behind me into the garden area right up against my dorm building. It's a homeless lady. She turns around, makes eye contact with me, drops her pants and has explosive diarrhea against the wall of my dorm building, then pulls up her pants, walks away. The light turned red and I went to class. The building didn't get clean for about a week. Story 44. In NYC. So I have a bunch one. Saw a homeless dude reading a newspaper shitting into a garbage can. Looked pretty relaxed, but as he finished the pages he used them as toilet paper. 2. Happened yesterday. One guy entered my subway car picking his teeth with his nails, grabbed the subway pole with the same hand, and then went back to town a minute later with the same hand. I don't know if it's more gross for everyone else, or for him, putting his hand back in his mouth. I have a bunch more but I'll leave it at this. Story 45. I was like 9 years old and went into a public restroom that had one long urinal for multiple people to use. Someone had left a styrofoam cup of coffee in there. I aimed for the cup and filled it halfway with pee. As I was washing my hands a guy comes in the bathroom and picks up the cup and takes one sip, then walks off with it. If bro left it by accident, but no one should put any cups you intend on drinking from into a urinal. Story 46. On the Skitran. I saw a very large drunk high-looking woman touching herself passionately. She had a 2L bottle of pop and box of pizza on the seat beside her. Story 47. A young woman and man making out right outside a grocery store, her hand in his jeans, giving him a vigorous hand job, felt uncomfortable just walking past. Story 48. When my fiancée and I were dating, I took her to Monterey for the weekend. We're from San Jose. I grew up in the area and the first time I took her there she fell in love with it too. Anyway, we drove down to Cannery Row and I got lucky with parking. There was a spot directly by Sly McFly's, a local bar. It was probably 11 a.m. and we were starting off the day. There's a bus stop bench right out front of the bar and a homeless guy was sitting there basking in the sun and looking strung out. As we were getting out of the car a passerby left a drink on the bench for the guy and he started sipping on it. I had gone around the car to open her door for her and as she got out I looked at this guy and watched him stick his hand in his pants and start cranking one out. I said something to my fiancée and she turned and saw it and started laughing. What's more is that nobody else seemed to notice, which somehow made it funnier. We're standing there watching the scene wondering why nobody was reacting when the guy apparently finished and pulled his hand out of his pants. He licked his fingers and then used one finger to stir the ice in his cup of lemonade and then downed the drink and left the cup there and walked off. Story 49. I saw a young male monkey getting it from behind by an older monkey. Scarred me for life. I was at the zoo and the monkey afterwards started running away only to be caught again and for it to repeat. There was an old lady in a wheelchair next to me and she was screaming the whole time not being able to roll away. Story 50. I saw someone take it in the cleaning bucket of a janitor in New York subway station while he wasn't paying attention. Then the janitor continued mopping the place with stained water and soap. Story 51. My sister witnessed a lot lizard climb out of one truck, squat over a greasy truck stop parking lot puddle, splash her with puddle water, then climb into another truck. Story 52. Not me seeing it in public, but one of the most effective hidden camera sketches I ever saw was one on where a guy put chocolate pudding into diapers, put them in a bin and then staged dumpster diving for them then eating out of them in full view. Even when you knew the setup it was still nauseating. Saw a little kid take it in the middle of an aisle in an IKEA, then run to his laughing parents. Story 53. I'm a truck driver. I've seen people have outside their trucks, with their trucks and on their trucks. I've seen people toss bags of at others, pour bottles all over the ground and at each other. I've seen drivers cut holes in their trucks to use the bathroom. I've seen lots lizards prostitutes wash themselves in puddles in parking lots and then go with another driver, rinse and repeat over and over. I called the cops on one driver who was shooting up God knows what in his driver's seat. Point. Not all of us are like this. The majority are not, but there are exceptions. Story 54. I was walking and saw movement out of the corner of my eye and turned to look into one of those little enclosed areas where businesses keep dumpsters and the zombie-looking guy was standing there, dead-eyed, shirtless, and kinda drooling with a heroin needle hanging out of his arm. Another time while walking in Waikiki, I saw a guy shooting up in his car. On my way back a few hours later the cops and some medics were pulling his dead body out of the car. Story 55. Eve got few contenders throwing up in a bus stop located in a transport industry because of drinking too much and he still was drinking. His vomit looked like if you got clear glue on top of a whole can of tuna. Blurg. There was a woman who tossed the plastic bag on the floor after her daughter took in it. I saw a guy spitting at other people when he was yapping, walking weirdly, very drunk. It was near a transport stop. A man was singing about blood, sat near where my mum and I sat. I saw some man, he was forcing strangers to give him their location in a bus. I later found out he was the same guy who robbed my house when I was a toddler. Story 56. Picking up a face mask that was lying on the stairs of an subway entrance and putting it on. That mask had clearly been lying there for longer and was trampled on a lot before. Story 57. I was in the process of hiring a new contractor for a building my work was involved in constructing. I belonged to an athletic club where everybody knew everyone else's business. a contractor recognized me and came up to me buck naked while he was drying himself off after his shower and proceeded to try and talk to me about the project. He kept drying his little pecker while he talked to me, and at one point even told me he could save me a lot of money by hiring some of these south of the border guys he got for cheap. Keep in mind I'm a POC. He attempted to shake my hand with the hand he had been flicking his little with. I declined the handshake and got going and hired a different contractor with some actual morals and tact. Story 58. Fairly popular, Bavarian-style town in my U.S. state that only becomes more popular during the winter holiday season for beer gardens, Christmas lights and the like. Town sets up rows of porta-potties for the influx of tourists during that season. Witnessed a dude come out of one potty obliterated drunk and angrily exclaim he dropped his phone in the tank. He then proceeds to get in his hands and knees and sticks his arm, elbow deep into the poo tank to fish around for his phone, and when I say fishing it looked like he was trying to mix everyone's deposits into one big savings account off. These porta-potties are heavily used. Think porta-potties at an Oktoberfest kind of ran through. He got the phone and tried to use the thin, good-for-nothing toilet paper to clean it off. But he also had contamination all over his shirt, arm and jeans. He had a date with him. I felt so bad for her. I don't know that there is anything after we die. But if there is, I know I'll have to answer for standing there in horror and not doing what I could to stop this man. I should have given him any cash I had to just walk away. I should have Venmo'd him. I should have asked his date if she wanted me to call an Uber away from this of a situation. But I'm ashamed to say I didn't, and I know I should have to answer for that. Have mercy on me. Story 59. I was probably about 12 and my sister 13. We were just chillin' down the river. We were sitting at a picnic area close to the public toilets when we heard some odd grunts coming from the men's toilet. Being young and curious, we went to investigate what was going on. Took a peek under the toilet door and there was a man pegging another man from behind. Also seen a different younger dude pull his pants down and take a dump into the town's river about 20 m away from that exact spot of the toilet party. Wild area. Story 60. Watched a guy having some sort of bad trip or mental crisis strip naked, smear his own on cars and business windows, shove a sandal up his own and walk around with it hanging out. Then, he ran his hands through his hair while screaming he was Jesus Christ. Story 61. Second-hand stories here. My uncle had a very interesting career in psychiatric nursing and he spent a long time working in a rehabilitation unit for offenders. He's told me some utterly wild stories, but here are two that stand out. He told me that as the residents' inmates were getting closer to being rehabilitated, they would sometimes be given jobs to do around the wards. The hospital also had a farm, which becomes pertinent to the second story anyway. One of the residents used to enjoy helping with cooking and used to make cups of coffee for the staff, etc. One day my uncle walked into the kitchen just in time to see this dude squirting off into the communally used sugar jar. Second one. The hospital administrator was visiting the hospital farm with his granddaughter one day. They had a mare which was a rescued horse and was seen as a sort of therapy animal. The administrator and his little granddaughter went into the stable this day only to find one of the deviants had rigged themselves a harness of sorts out of washing line, apparently, and was busy either trying to, or actively penetrating the horse. I guess some folk can't be rehabilitated. Story 62. I saw a homeless man laying on a bench at a bus station jacking his wiener. Also saw a drug-addled woman drop her pants, squat down and shove drugs into her vagina about 3 feet in front of me. Same bus station. Story 63. I live in NYC, so boy do I have a lot. Saw a woman smoke straight up crack on the subway. Not a care in the world. Saw another homeless woman shitting in a MC Donald's bag in the middle of the sidewalk. Eve seen drunk girls vomit on themselves after clubbing. Eve even seen people just straight up having intercourse in the middle of the sidewalk. It's crazy over here. Story 64. Went to get lunch at a place that rhymes with schmarbies and went to the bathroom first. Some guy in the stall was pooping. As I was washing my hands, the dude finished up, came out of the stall, then rushed out of the bathroom without washing his hands. I left the bathroom right behind him so I wouldn't have to touch that door handle, and this gave me a perfect view of him entering the door to the kitchen where he was on shift as one of the cooks. Turned me off from a place that rhymes with armies for a long time. Story 65. When I was a teenager, I was walking through Seattle and heard this guy let a very loud and audible groan. Then in one smooth moment, he dropped his pants, bent over, and explosively all over the sidewalk. The sound alone was something else, like someone dumping a bucket of chili on the ground. Story 66. Not a lot of dead bug insect related stories. In about 2014, I went to an amusement park, called Michigan's Adventure on back-to-back weeks, one with friends, and the next week just me and my parents. I was about 13 to 14 at the time. This isn't about the theme park though, it's about what happened afterwards. The first week, my parents, my friends and I had to change plans, so we ate at a local mom and pop restaurant that turned out to be very delicious. The second week, however, we went to the restaurant we were originally going to go the first time. It was in Muskegon, Michigan, and truth be told, I try not to be spiteful, but part of me hopes the restaurant has shut down by this point. This place had flies coming out the wazoo. It was absurd, almost as though it was a biblical plague level of fly overrun. The restaurant was intruding upon the flies, not the flies intruding upon the restaurant. At that point, we actually asked to be seated elsewhere 2 times. It was so severe, my parents were looking forward to this food and spent a lot of money on it, so they were annoyed that I was complaining that I wanted to leave. I think that they silently understood that this was absolutely ridiculous though. It was to the point where when they got a seafood boil pot, there were literally gnats swarming around the food and landing in it. They ate a decent bit of it and just shoot the flies away, but as someone who does not have much appreciation for bugs, I still don't understand even as an adult now why they didn't just leave. Story 67. A classmate way back when dropped his mac and cheese on the classroom tile floor, looked around to see if anyone saw, then just scooped it back into the bowl and ate it. Story 68. Probably that woman who whipped out a small trash can, placed it in the middle of the sidewalk and proceeded to take a that's up there with the dude who used his as a wacky inflatable flailing tube man whilst peeing. Story 69. I saw an unhoused lady try to in a plastic grocery bag while I was sitting at a stoplight. It was not a solid movement, so she got it all over her hands. When she was finished, she waddled a few steps and chucked it at a dumpster. Splat, haunts me.